All right. Good
Yo, yo.
evening. Yo, good evening, everyone. Welcome,
Peace.
welcome to the Universal Hip Hop Museum in Carnegie Hall Ultramagnetic live stream event. I'm so happy to have everyone join this event during Black History Month. And let's go ahead and get started. For those who are unfamiliar with Afrofuturism, it lies at the intersection of culture, technology, social economics, and racial politics. I would like to go ahead and first introduce our first keynote speaker. He's the chief curator at the Universal Hip Hop Museum. He's a curator of the Paradise Collection, hip hop history, photos, and memorabilia. He's the architect of X-Clan, a writer, DJ, producer, filmmaker, artist. He's from the South Bronx and has a collection of hip hop artifacts preserved beginning in 1979. He's worked with Def Jam. He's worked at Def Jam Records and helped develop the world's first online music company. Let us welcome Paradise Gray. What up, Dice?
Yo, peace. How y'all today?
Good. We're doing good.
Yeah.
And our next keynote speaker, he was a founding member of the Def Jam Recordings Group, Third Base, and released 2 gold albums from the label from 1989 to 1992. In 1987, he established the first hip hop radio show with DJ Clark Kent at Columbia University. He has worked as a historian and consultant with artists and collectors dedicated to preserving hip hop artifacts and history. He is currently working on a book with Paradise Gray entitled The Golden Age of Hip Hop, 1983 to 1992, and illustrative history. Let us welcome co-curator at the Universal Hip Hop Museum, Prime Minister Pete Nice. What up, Pete?
What's up? Yo, happy to be here. Glad that my man Paradise Gray, we got the Pittsburgh Bronx connection going right here.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, let's get started. We'll start with you, Paradise. Go ahead and take it away, my man.
Hey, peace and love, y'all. Today we're going to discuss hip hop's contributions to Afrofuturism and the things that inspired us in the beginning was laid out very well by our ancestors before us. I would like to start with some of the inspiring imagery and things that inspired me as a young age. I would like to say peace and love and dedicate this event to my late brother, Michael Green, AKA Coach Green from DeWitt Clinton High School. I like to start with my brother because at a young age, when I was living in the South Bronx, when other big brothers were showing their little brothers the streets, my big brother was showing me the universe. When other big brothers were taking their little brothers up on the roof to shoot guns, my big brother was taking me up on the roof with a telescope. And he introduced me to science, art, and collecting comic books. And because of that comic collecting, you know, I really got into Afrofuturism from the beginning. And I'd like to introduce my man, Pete Nice, to show you some of the early hip hop flyers that really bridged the gap for me between comic books, sci-fi, and Afrofuturism. Pete, you want to take it away and show us the early hip hop art that helped inspire Afrofuturism?
Yeah, definitely, Dice. So when we look at, you know, the Afrofuturism and the ceilings or the starts of it in hip hop, the first, you know, as the curators of Universal Hip Hop Museum, with all the research that we're doing, with other collectors, with other scholars, the place that me and Paradise have picked up on it is on the actual party flyers that were created by some of the great masters, most prominently the late great Phase 2, who was a great friend and a great mentor. And, you know, Phase had his own history as hip hop historian, a dancer, a DJ, and MC, and as, you know, the penultimate writer and artist. But Phase 2, you know, one of the things that he held most dear to his heart was his creation of the flyers, which started with his own group, the Wicked Wizards, in like around 1977. And then in 1978, he started to do flyers for Grandmaster Flash and Ray Chandler. And at that time, when they were the 3 MCs. So Phase started with some very basic elements, but very quickly, as you get to the point where before even Rapper's Delight was released and before there were any rap records, Phase was bringing into the mix, you know, futuristic scenes. And one of the things that he was obsessed with was creating images of robots. So one of the first flyers that we can show here, it's actually Phase's original artwork that, you know, he had in the archives. I think I met with Phase at the vegan Chinese spot downtown, and he pulled out of a bag this incredible original board template with, you know, an amazingly beautiful robot profile. And I believe this was for a show with the Wicked Wizards. We could move to the next images on the PowerPoint. Yep, keep it rolling. We got our little intro there. Somehow George Jetson got into this.
Oh, I know why George Jetson got into it. I was supposed to talk about when I was a child, the first images that I ever was exposed to was cartoons and things of such. And Hanna-Barbera in particular rubbed me the wrong way, even as a small child. The 2 most popular cartoons were the Flintstones, which was a depiction of the so-called past, and the Jetsons, which represented the future. And I guess according to Hanna-Barbera, there was no Black people in the past and no Black people in the future, as there were no Black people on the Flintstones and none on the Jetsons. So I wanted to show those slides as an illustration of that.
They do got a robot there, though.
Yeah.
So I think we had to go to the full screen here. So what we're seeing now, Dice, are, before we got interrupted, all the album covers of all the different groups that you were saying influenced the early Afrofuturism, from the Earth, Wind and Fire's, Funkadelics.
Yeah, could you show those flyers and then continue? Show those images and then continue with the flyers. Thank you.
Yeah, no, they're showing the album covers right now, Dice. It's all the Earth, Wind and Fire album covers.
Right. As a small child, the Earth, Wind and Fire and the Parliament Funkadelic, they were a great introduction into artwork that not only illustrates the past, but the present and the possible future also.
No, and you can see the futurism in these images clearly. And if we could move on to the next joint.
Yeah.
All right, Dice, the next one that's up here is the Head to the Sky video, or video of the song. So you want to talk a little about that before we get into the flyers?
Yes, absolutely. To go along with the imagery that Earth, Wind and Fire had with their artwork, they also had elaborate futuristic costumes, and their music told us to keep our heads to the sky. So I just wanted to just play a little snippet of that so that we could look up into the universe and think about the great ancestors and the foundation that they laid for us in hip hop. They give us breadcrumbs. You could go on with the flyers. You don't have to play that music.
Well, now, Dice, before we get to the flyers, the next element that you had was Parliament Mothership Connection. That was your next thing.
Okay, so the link between Parliament Funkadelic, they gave us the P-Funk. and they definitely brought down the mothership. And ain't nothing more Afrofuturistic than the mothership connection, baby. I like to definitely thank George Clinton and his P-Funk All-Stars, Bootsy, and James Brown for laying the foundation of hip hop, which was funk. The imagery that George Clinton and James Brown and Earth, Wind and Fire gave us was immediately inspirational and gave us an incredible bridge to the future.
All right, so now we get back to where you handed it off earlier with the flyers. So these two panels have several of the futuristic designs of phase two, where he was doing the logos from Mike and Dave's record label, even with, you know, celestial and planets and all types of ill imagery that was so, you know, technically ahead of its time, especially in hip hop. And if we move through to the next one, we will actually get to that flyer that I started off describing. That go next one. And we find, oh, well, and here he is, the man himself, known as True Mathematics, before COVID, rocking the skeleton mask. And that is the man, the legend. And this is his creation. This is what he pulled out. So you see, this is the template where it has the Scotch tape over all the letters. And this was the Wicked Wizards playing at Fashion Moda, 147th and 3rd Avenue. And you can see the detail of this ill, you know, robot, which he started depicting as early as I could see on the flyers right here in 1979. This motif continued way throughout his career, where he developed into sculptures. And, you know, the last few times that I had seen Faze, he was, you know, collecting, you know, different types of robots that he would get from Japanese artists. And then he was creating his own robots. So this started, you know, all the way back in 79, and he was incorporating this into these party flyers. Now, on the whole, you know, there were some other flyer designers who were on the same wavelength and who were really influenced by Faze. And one of those artists was Anthony Riley, known as Riley or AR or Riley. And if we go to the next panel, we'll see how Anthony Riley, here he actually incorporates an actual DJ mixer, the type of mixer that Flash or Theodore or Islam would have used in March 16th, 1979. The mixer is almost like a spaceship or a space station in space. You see the planets, you see the, you know, the infinite universe there. And, you know, this was for the L brothers with Theodore. And, you know, Riley and Faze were kind of on that same wavelength, and, you know, they were kind of ahead of the curve. And you can see as they took from all these other concepts of the funk groups and everyone who came before them, these technicalities were making their way into their designs for the party flyers. Now, as we move on to the next one, this is an actual joint that Paradise Gray actually collected when he went to the Renaissance Ballroom in February of 1979 to see Grandmaster Flash and the 4 MCs before there was the 5th with Raheem. And at the Renaissance Ballroom, this flyer was created by a very mysterious character known as Lil Short Shot. Now, me and our man Short Shot LaRock, who's like the premier flyer scholar and collector, had thought that a lot of the style was very similar to a lot of like Phase 2 designs, almost like Lil Short Shot was biting the style of Faze a little bit, almost to the point where we thought that Faze was playing a joke on everyone and actually making these flyers himself and using a pseudonym. But I don't think that was the case. So you see here that there's an Iron Man type character. Dice, tell me what you thought in 1979, seeing this flyer at that time with Flash and the Furious Four.
Oh, wow. This was when I really got inspired to start collecting flyers when, you know, my love of hip hop and comic books came together. This was an amazing, amazing flyer for me. And I actually, as a kid, what really, really made me love hip hop was that the MCs and DJs sounded like superheroes to me themselves. Grandmaster Flash, Cool DJ Hurt, Grandmaster Flowers. You know what I'm saying? It was just amazing that now I could actually have the marriage of my actual heroes walking down the street as ghetto superstars rather than just being a two-dimensional made-up character in a book.
And you know what? That's interesting that you bring up all the superhero names, because when Almighty KG interviewed DJ Smokey and the Smokatrons, like Smokatrons is kind of like a name that's kind of intergalactic there, but they actually said that all of their first names came from cowboy movies and karate movies. You know, Five Fingers of Death, all these different things. So Smokatrons and their group was the Master Plan Bunch, and they got all of these names from the cowboy and karate movies. And then as you see the next wave of, you know, hip hop artists and DJs kind of grasp onto the comic book characters, the Flashes and of that sort. So you definitely see that transition. So you see this figure here, which is, you know, incredibly drawn, and it's almost like, it's like Iron Man, right? It looks more like an Iron Man character that has, you know, power coming out from the hand into the Grandmaster Flash explosion, and you can clearly see that he's in space. You know, you see all the different names of the MCs are in clouds, and, you know, whether there's planets behind it. So this in early 1979 is yet another. So we have these three representations of Afrofuturism in hip hop, kind of like the early examples. So let's move on from the Renaissance Ballroom to our next example, which gets more into Dice's, you know, superhero motif. And, you know, what people say Black Panther is Afrofuturism, and starting back in the Marvel universe, you have this flyer from Queens, St. Gertrude's, where Grandmaster Flowers is performing with Woody Wood. And you see the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man swinging through the flyer. And that's just another example of what Dice is saying, you know, and again, in 1979, pre-rap records, pre-commercialization of hip hop. So let's move on to the next one, and we'll see some more superhero motifs. Here's the Club Fantasia in Queens. We got the Battle of the DJs between Professor and Company and Cypher Sounds, and they appear as Superman and Flash. So you see this motif a lot in 1979, you know, as much space influence as, you know, superhero influence. And the superhero influence seemed to be even more in Queens and Brooklyn, which a lot of people consider more of the disco style DJs and their flyers. So let's move on past this one to another superhero joint. Oh no, actually, so as we gave phase one his due, of course, Buddy Esquire was another incredible flyer artist and creator. And he too, although a little bit later than Phase, segued into some futurism in his designs. This one from Manhattanville Center in 1980 is a more simple design, but definitely more like an Art Deco-ish type space station. And, you know, his graphics kind of gave that futuristic feel to it as well. And this one comes from the collection of man Short Shot in the Rock. And let's move on to the next. Thank you to Short Shot. Happy birthday. It was his birthday yesterday. Now, this joint is one that Paradise also went to this party. This is a Buddy Esquire where he depicts, very expertly almost like a space station. You want to describe that one, Dice? What you thought of that one back in the day when you put
Is
that
that
in
the
your
blue
pocket?
flyer?
What's that? Yeah, the blue one with the space
Yeah.
station.
This one really made Buddy Esquire one of my favorite artists and inspired me incredibly. He had spaceships flying around, and it looks like it could be a scene from Star Trek or Deep Space Nine. Amazing. And this was before I really even got into sci-fi movies yet. My sci-fi was coming from comic books and hip hop flyers.
Right. And Buddy had some other flyers, some that we're not picturing here, where it was actually almost like a Battlestar Galactica type motif with like a space battle with, just so much action and, so much depiction of fine detail of, weapons and explosions and, just the whole backdrop of the planetary, atmosphere. So let's move on to the next one after we move on from Buddy. And then we go back to Phase. And here we see, Star Wars came out in 1977. So of course that was an influence all over the world at, just space in general. And here we have, for the Ecstasy Garage Disco, Phase incorporates the Star Wars font into a microphone, which almost looks like a spaceship motif where it says Starsky for, of course, Busy Bee Starsky for these Thursday night rappers contests at the Ecstasy Garage. So, not as prominent as the other ones with the robots, but you can see the influence right there. So let's go on to the next one as well. So here is where Phase continues with his robot motif, and you can't get more Afrofuturistic than calling a jam at Harlem World the Outer Space Jam. And he even uses the graphics of computer type text. And this jam had the Cold Crush, had Master Don and the Death Committee. And this is 1981. So, from 79 to 81, there was so much change, so many landmarks in hip hop. And in many ways, the start of the commercialization of hip hop and rap records that, Phase is still falling back to the, his transition to try to, take a Phase would sometimes say to me that in incorporating like this intergalactic theme or robots, it just made sometimes these ordinary parties that might be happening in just a gym or in a community center or even at a club like Harlem World into something that was special, that it was otherworldly. So, he definitely pulled that off. And some nights he said, depending on who was performing, no matter how good his flyer was, there'd be a line around the block, or some nights a promoter would lose his shirt. Van Silk could tell some of us about all the promoters who lost their shirt depending on who was performing. And, the flyer men, the Phase Twos, the Anthony Rileys, the Buddy Esquire, the Cisco Kids, their work, was a mainstay and, really was, I think, the biggest evidence of Afrofuturism in hip hop. And as we go to the next one here, this is another Phase masterpiece. And this is also his original template and his art, where you see just the skilled drawing of the robot depiction on the left, the Galactic Super Show at Lincoln Square Center, 65th Street. And I think for $5, that was the damage that Phase said. And once again, a masterpiece, and, just cements, Phase 2's legacy as, probably the greatest influence of Afrofuturism in hip hop in the beginning of it. And as we slide over, we get to our boy Africa Islam. So, as the Zulu Nation developed from roughly 1975 on, Africa Islam as the son of Bambaataa would also get into the flyer game and design some of his own flyers. And here is, again, a 1979 flyer where Islam incorporates a robot, you know, kind of like an Iron Man type looking robot for this new club called the Atmosphere on Southern Boulevard in the Bronx. And, you know, pretty much you can see how Islam, Zulus, and Bambaataa could easily transition into what happened next in hip hop as we move to the next slide. And Dice, you can kind of, actually, before we move on to Soul Sonic Force, Dice, we have the Superman and Muhammad Ali graphic. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, back to the superhero theme?
Right. So once again, we have the superhero theme. And just like in the rest of the media in America, you know, African Americans, Black people, we were not represented at the same level that others were represented. And back in the days when I was a small child, they had a commercial about the positive self-image of young Black boys. And they had a little Black boy who had a blanket around his neck, like a superhero cape. And he was standing in the mirror in a superhero pose, but the reflection in the mirror that he was looking at was Christopher Reeve's style white man as Superman. And it was a very powerful commercial. Even as a young person, I don't remember the words of the commercial or the text, but I remember how it affected me, because I remembered tying jackets and t-shirts and blankets around my neck and running around the house as Superman also. And when this particular comic book came out, it was a new hero, Muhammad Ali. And he actually knocked Superman out in the comic book. And it was amazing. I must have read that book 1,000 times. But after this book came out, the reflection that I saw in my mirror was no longer Christopher Reeves, but it was Muhammad Ali, who not only was a pioneer of being a Black superhero, but he was also an incredible rapper and poet who also helped lay the foundations for hip hop, along with other great speakers such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and H. Rap Brown. You know, Muhammad Ali was that dude. And in early hip hop, we would often say float like a butterfly, sting like a bee in our rhymes. And I also just like to give a shout out to the Last Poets and Gil Scott Heron on that level for helping set the foundation for rapping.
And you know, Muhammad Ali would make his way onto hip hop party flyers too, via, of course, Phase 2, who did a great Muhammad Ali flyer for the Ecstasy Garage Disco.
Yes, sir.
And we will slide into the next one and continue the thought previously. So as Africa Islam had that depiction in his flyer, we'll have Dice get into Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, and you know, pretty much the epitome of Afrofuturism at that time.
Yes, sir. The imagery that Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force used was inspired by George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, Rick James, the Ohio Players, and they use elaborate costumes to depict futuristic vibrations for young people in hip hop. And their song Planet Rock, it don't get more Afrofuturistic than that. And hip hop rocked the whole planet with that song inspired by Trans Europe Express.
And yeah, I mean, definitely the sound of the music as well was futuristic. So,
yes, sir.
You know, from artistically, you know, on paper and in the design of costumes, but even more so in the music.
Absolutely. We're looking for the perfect beat. And their cover for Renegades of Funk also creates another bridge between hip hop, superheroes, comic books, and sci-fi. And
shout out to Arthur Baker on that production as well. So as we move on to the next joint. As Dice, we're moving into your commentary on DST and Herbie Hancock and Rocket.
Do we have a video for that?
Yeah, we do. We might want to play.
Yeah, we want to play the
a
video
little
first.
section of that. So we see the half-body robot. Did you say DST said someone still had the robots?
The company that originally created the robots were from England, and he's digging in the crates trying to locate them now. But hopefully we can find the originals. If not, I'm gonna hit my boy Fox up, man. Maybe we could rebuild those robots with CMU. Or maybe our new science partners could help us with that project. What you think?
Definitely, but that would be ill to track down some of these robots for the Universal Hip Hop Museum.
Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for with our show also.
Now, what did DST fill you in on, like, back then? Because I know you've had a lot of conversations about Rocket with him and its importance.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, Rocket, Herbie Hancock with Grand Mixer DXT won the first Grammy in hip hop in 1984. The same night Michael Jackson won multiple Grammys. He won the Grammy, every Grammy he was nominated for, except for that one. And that was hip hop's first Grammy. And Grand Mixer DXT appeared on national TV at the Grammys. For the first time, a DJ and B-boys was seen on TV together. And it was an amazing performance and got a standing ovation. As a matter of fact, I cried that night because it was the first time I really officially, properly saw myself depicted on TV. That took hip hop to a whole nother level. And we're all indebted to Grand Mixer DXT and Herbie Hancock for bringing that style of futurism to us and that brand of hip hop.
I guess we can move on to the next screen. Now, DST, even in a lot of the costuming for groups at that point with Ramel Z, there were a lot of futuristic costumes that even took the Soul Sonic Force costumes even further. Like you see the costumes that Jazzy J had and Bam, and how people expanded on them in those years in the mid 80s.
Kumo D with the Star Trek glasses and Tila Rock with the red leather.
Definitely. And as you get through that time period and we get more into the golden era and even right into the pocket of the golden era, of course, Public Enemy PE with Fear of a Black Planet. Why don't you talk about the significance of that in terms of the Afrofuturistic movement?
Well, Fear of a Black Planet is Afrofuturism in a nutshell. Because when you dig into the philosophy behind Public Enemy's imagery, it goes right at the heart of white supremacy, which was the foundation of why, we never saw African-American inventors and African-American scientists and imagery projected in science fiction or anything futuristic at that time. In fact, in the early days, the only thing on TV that really looked like me was Good Times. And it didn't really look like they was having no good time to me. They should have named that show Hard Times. And also a spinoff of the Archie Bunker white supremacist show, The Jeffersons. So now we're really starting to break into the fact that not only are we here, but we've been here and we're gonna be here. That's where Public Enemy and the imagery of Fear of a Black Planet started marrying, music and culture with futurism. And we don't die, we multiply, and directly using rap music to combat, the the theme back in those days was that Black men was an endangered species, and like we were going to be, incarcerated away, and we were going to be murdered off the planet. And the reason for that, as Public Enemy so incredibly depicted with that image, was that this is what the foundation of their problem is. They fear a Black planet.
Word. Hey, shout out to Mr. Bentley with your Jeffersons mention. As we pass through PE, PE influenced so many groups, and of course, right at the same time, we got Paradise Gray, the architect, and the X Clan with their own take on Afrofuturism. So there's no one better to describe that, Dice, than you.
Yes, sir. Which image is that? Is that the To the East Black was covered?
Upon a time, and the days so bad glorious, the tri-dimensional
The
house.
pink Cadillac, Pinky's right there.
Powers to the translators of the interplanetary phone code. Spoken religion, spoken lesson, key bearers spoken to the east. Earthbound. We are messengers of Ra, whispering the secrets of the ancients. Vanguards. This is protected by the red, the black, and the green with the key.
Wow. So many references in that song, the song is called Earthbound, and it tells a science fiction story of ancient order coming to Earth to save its people, and that's what we consider the Black Watch movement. And it's also amazing that he said, coming to you like a priest in panther skin, which
right.
way in 1990, way before the movie Black Panther, we were making references to being a Black Panther coming forth to defend his people. You know what I'm saying? So also the inspiration, you hear a lot of speak of the pharaohs, which is bringing history today and bridging it with the future, and also the other inspiration of George Clinton and Parliament. The track that we sampled was George Clinton and references to free your mind and your butt will follow. So there's a lot to unravel in that song, and I'd like to see today's teachers and scholars unravel that song and see what they think about it now.
Right. And Dice, another great manifestation of Afrofuturism is in these album covers, the iconic album covers like PE, but also your album cover. Tell us a little bit about the design of the cover, because the one that we can see right now on the screen is Unique and Dashan, Black to the Future. So before we get into that one, just tell me a little bit about the X Clan cover that we just saw.
If you look closely at it, you'll see that there's a lot of our ancestors, Marcus Garvey, Bob Marley, Malcolm X, Sojourner Truth, so many of our Black heroes dating back many, many years, intertwined with what was current members of the Black Watch movement who were young people. You can even see ISIS in there. You know what I'm saying? Brother Jay, Professor X, Sugar Shaft, and myself overlaid on a big X, which was like the crossroads, but the crossroads was in space. If you look closer, you can see the stars and perfectly depicted, the past, the present, and the future at the crossroads with the pink caddy, which was representative of Detroit Red, aka Malcolm X.
Believe that, sissies. Rest in peace, Lumumba and Sugar Shaft, right?
Yes, sir.
And as you look at Unique and Deshaun, they incorporated, you see the figures of the past, Malcolm X, of course, right on the right with the Black to the Future album. So
and Marcus Garvey on there also.
Right, also, exactly. Marcus Garvey's on the
A lot
left.
of people attribute one of the foundations of Afrofuturism to a book called Black to the Future. But that came out in the 90s. Actually, this album came out in early 1990, before the X-Clan album. Unique and Dashan were the first ones to wear the crowns that I created for the Black Watch movement on the cover of their album.
Incredible. So let's move on to the next panel. All right, Dice. So we're getting, as you get past that period, we got right here a segment with Missy Elliott, and it's a video clip.
Yeah, so let's play that. Let's get right into Missy. Missy is still futuristic. Shout out to the queens of hip hop for keeping it real. Also, while we're talking about the women in hip hop, I'll give a shout out to Salt and Pepper, who with the attire that they wore in their Push It video, they represented the female version of Afrofuturistic costumes and superheroes for hip hop.
Definitely. And, as we were talking earlier, you were talking a little bit about Tupac related to this subject, Dice. So why don't you get a little into that?
Yes, Tupac was a fan of sci-fi and Afrofuturism, and he was a big fan of Octavia Butler. And he was inspired to show off his version of Afrofuturism with his video for California Love, which was inspired by the movie Mad Max, which was a post-apocalyptic vibration. And we have a clip.
The image we have here is him in that vest.
A word, and his costumes also. He has a lot of iconic imagery wearing not only that vest, but other costumes that were very futuristic also. Do we have a video clip for California Love?
No, we don't have the clip. We just have the image of him in the vest.
Dope. Man, we should find that vest. That vest is off the hook.
Yeah, that's definitely could be one of the lost treasures out there.
Absolutely. What's our next slide?
We're getting towards the home stretch here, and
yes, sir.
That is actually the last slide. We would be remiss in calling this lecture Ultramagnetic without shouting out Cool Keith and the boys. And shout out to Sed G down in Arkansas right now. Last time I saw him, he was on 128th Street.
Wow.
And he just moved down to Arkansas. So why don't, having had Ultramagnetic and Latin Quarter in the early days, how would you tie Keith and the crew into the the Afrofuturistic realm?
Their whole rhyme style was futuristic, and their lyrical content, using a lot of big words and scientific formulas, and Cool Keith, and Cool Keith wound up, creating many alter egos wearing space helmets. Wearing space helmets and things like that. Also, since we're talking about futuristic space beings, we got to give a shout out to our brother, rest in peace, to MF Doom.
Right, Doom had his contribution right there in the alien arena. Shout out to Zimbabwe Legit as well, another contributor in that realm who
we talk about Afrofuturism. We got to give it up to Big Boy and Andre. You know what I'm saying? The Outcasts, the AT Aliens. You know what I'm saying? They brought that outer space movement to Atlanta big time, and they represented amazing Afrofuturism, especially with that movie that they created. It was like in the past, but at the same time, it was in the future. That was amazing.
Exactly.
Hey, Pete, Dice, in the interest of time, I think we only got a few more minutes. Do you think we have time for any questions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, Kyler, do we have any questions from people during the live stream?
Or comments?
So people were just saying how dope this Zoom was. Incredible album. Professor X killing it. Exclaim word dope. Brother J, one of the most underrated MCs of all time.
For sure.
Rocket DST was amazing. Had me
Yes.
dancing.
Okay, if we don't have any questions, I'd like to say and end it with this. The most Afro-futuristic thing that I've been involved in my life is the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Because, you know, while we look forward to cutting the ribbon and opening our doors in 2024, we're not necessarily building a museum for 2024. We're building a museum for 3024. And we're going to be incorporating AI and AR and projections and holograms, as well as the physical artifacts of the past. We're going to create something that's about the past, the present, and the future. And we ask everybody to please contribute to building this museum by visiting UHHM.org and contributing with finances to help us build this museum so that we can create a family atmosphere for students, teachers, and people who want to have fun and learn something throughout the future. All right. And we'll be dropping
And
science
like you
on
said,
y'all.
you can see subjects like this covered, you know, within the exhibitions at the new museum when it's up and running.
Yeah. So I'd like
once
to
again,
thank my man Kyler.
thanks to Carnegie Hall for having us.
Thank you, Carnegie Hall.
Dice is in the Carnegie territory out there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank y'all and peace.
Peace. Thank you,
Thank
Thank you, Pete.
Abstract. No doubt.
And that is the end of our live stream event. Thank you to Carnegie Hall for allowing us to put together this Ultramagnetic live stream event talking about Afrofuturism during Black History Month. So that is it. Peace and love to everyone. Thank you and have a good night.